Welcome back. This is Chicken Philosophy, Carl Jung's Black Books, Part 50. Thought there was going to be some music or lights or something. Okay, so this is the part of Chicken Philosophy. The original, Chicken Philosophy started with reading Carl Jung's Black Books, and we're still reading Carl Jung's Black Books. So we're going to pick up right where we left off with Carl Jung's next entry, where he'll chronicle what happened in his active imagination, vision, the next day or shortly after the previous one. But before we get to that, Editor Edward.
Hey, nice haircut.
Thank you. Okay. As you know, we're doing Carl Jung, and we always do the rune. Mm-hmm. But when I come on, I like to do a few other things. The first time we did it took too long, and then I started trying to speed it up, but it just felt rushed. So what I would like to do is do it at my own pace, but have you do a bit of editing to make it short. Can you do that for me?
Of course. Any music requests?
Yeah, I haven't heard in a long time L'Homme Sauvage.
Little something like this?
No, that's Le Planète Sauvage. L'Homme Sauvage is the band.
Right. I got confused because in Le Planète Sauvage, L'Homme Sauvage are the non-domesticated humans.
Yes, and I think the band had that in mind when they named their band. But
all right. How about this?
Perfect. The things up on the screen, so we'll see. We'll just break down real quick the meaning of each one, and then we'll see how it relates to today's reading. The rune at the top is called Othilla, also separation, inherited property or possessions, also native lands or home. Dad's old Rider-Waite deck says 4 of Pentacles. Here is the miser clinging to his gold. He is hanging on tightly to his material possessions.
Here shown reversed, so specifically prejudice, covetousness, suspicion, hindrances, setbacks, and material ambitions. The spendthrift, too free with money, chance of loss of earthly possessions.
The Golden Dawn Ritual Tarot says Queen of Swords. She is a gray-haired matriarch who sits on her throne above the clouds like a majestic statue, wields a mighty sword in her right hand, while in her left she grasps the newly severed head of a sovereign king. This alludes to the idea that clear insight and accurate understanding are the weapons used to fend off the illusions of the astral world. My old Celtic tarot from when I was a teenager says Page of Cups. A well-dressed youth or maiden stands contemplating a cup from which a fish emerges, a symbol of the appearance of an idea in the imagination. The White Eagle medicine wheel card is the Eagle. The Eagle tells you to call upon Eagle Spirit to lift you into the sunlit realms and gives you the opportunity to awaken your inner and outer visions. It is offering you gifts of courage and freedom. The magical item is the Belt of Dwarven Kind. While wearing this belt, you gain the following benefits. Your Constitution score increases by 2 to a maximum of 20. You have advantage on Charisma, Persuasion checks made to interact with dwarves. And the monster is Drider. The only thing interesting on here is sunlight sensitivity. While in sunlight, the Drider has disadvantage on attack rolls, as well as on wisdom or perception checks that rely on sight. So it would seem that the Eagle has some good advice today. And that's our divination. So we'll see how well that lines up with today's reading. And since they mentioned persuasion, Editor Edward, would you mind playing Throbbing Gristle's Persuasion? That always pops into my head whenever I hear the word persuasion. You don't have to play it the whole time. Just you put on whatever you'd like. Okay. January 14th, 1914. You are tranquility. Who are you? Names and words leave me cold anymore. There should probably also be no words or names. The line indicating we're going under. I am standing in a high hall. Before me, I see a green curtain between two columns. The curtain parts quietly. I see into a not very deep room. Stone tiles behind a bare wall. There, in a smaller arched window with bluish glass, I set foot on the stair leading up through the curtain to this room and enter. In the rear wall of the room, I see doors on both the right and left. It's as if I stood at a crossroads. Shall I choose right or left? I choose the right. The door is open. I enter. It is a large library of prosaic modern character. Lecterns, green lamps. Obviously, the library is technically well equipped for 1914. What does that even look like? In the background to the right sits a small, thin man of pale complexion, about 40 years old, apparently the librarian. The atmosphere is troubling. Scholarly ambitions, scholarly conceit, wounded scholarly vanity, scholarly anxieties of the malicious critic, the luckier competitor, and being wrong. Apart from the librarian, I see no one. I go toward him. He looks up from his book and asks, quote, "What do you want?" End quote. I think what occurs to me is Thomas A. Kempis. Thomas A. Kempis with an accent grave. Quote, "I'd like to have Thomas A. Kempis, the imitation of Christ." End quote. He looks at me somewhat astonished, as if he didn't credit me with such an interest. He gives me an order form to fill out. What? That's the end of the book. We finished volume 3. How did I not know that we were about to finish volume 3? Well, there are a lot of footnotes. And normally I don't read these footnotes, but I guess I'll read them. Otherwise this episode will be extremely short. I mean, I could start volume 4. I'll think about it. All right. So as far as the date, Wednesday, Liber Secundus, chapter 14, Divine Folly. I don't want spoilers. I'm going to read Liber Novus when I finish the Black Books. All right. The preceding 2 paragraphs are not reproduced in Liber Novus. I am not going to read the footnotes because Yeah, I don't need to be reading about Liber Novus when we're going to read that in the future. Okay, Editor Edward, could you skip the part where I put this book back in and pull out the fourth one? This is truly a monumentous occasion in the history of Carl Jung's Black Books on Chicken Philosophy. We're starting a new book, a new volume, for the fourth time in the history of this program. So this is, book 4. It's a bit thicker, a bit heavier. It's got some illustration. Oh, that's where the translation is. Okay, let's see how it goes. I'll start at the beginning and I guess read one journal entry, assuming that this is journal entries. Are we going to find out what happens in the library? We shall see. I forgot to light this earlier, so I'm lighting it now. It's frankincense. Speaking of imitatio Christi, right? Am I right? Not really. Okay. So, again, as always, we've got the scans of his actual handwriting for those who like trying to read other people's cursive and speak German. I am neither of those things, so I am going to skip to the end of the book where the translation is into English text. Book 4, January 14th through March 9th, 1914. La somma sapienza e il primo amore. An inscription in Tony Wolfe's handwriting. The highest wisdom and the primal love. Is the 6th line in the 3rd canto of Dante's Inferno. All right. So it turns out this is a continuation from the previous one. So we stopped in the middle of a journal entry. That's why it seemed so short and like what he was. I turned right. I'm in a library and I asked for a book and he gave me a piece of paper. The end. No, we're continuing. Book 4. Cool. Yes. I too think that it's astonishing to ask for Thomas à Kempis. I, quote, are you surprised that I'm requesting Thomas à Kempis, end quote. Librarian, quote, well, yes, the book is seldom asked for, and I wouldn't have expected this interest from you. End quote. I must confess that I'm also somewhat surprised by this inspiration. But recently I came across a short passage. Hate it when that happens, then you have to... Never mind. From Thomas à Kempis that made a particular impression on me. Why? I can't really say. It dealt, something crossed out, especially with the problem of the imitation of Christ. Librarian, do you have particular theological or historical interests, or do you mean whether I will read it for the purpose of prayer? Librarian, smiling, well, hardly. If I read Thomas à Kempis, I do so for the sake of prayer, or something similar, rather than out of scholarly interest. Librarian, are you that religious? I had no idea. Parentheses, slightly sneering. Billy Idol. With a rebel, yeah. End parentheses. You know that I value science extraordinarily highly. But there are actually moments in life where science also leaves us empty and sick. In such moments, a book like Thomas's means very much to me, since it is written from the soul. Librarian, but somewhat old-fashioned. We can no longer get involved in Christian dogmatics these days, surely. We haven't come to an end with Christianity by simply putting it aside. It seems to me that there's more to it than we see. Librarian. What is there about it? I. For what reasons, and moreover at what age, do men set it aside? Presumably most do so during their student days, or perhaps even earlier. Would you call that a particularly discriminating age? And have you ever examined more closely the grounds on which people put aside positive religion? The grounds are mostly dubious, such as that the contents of belief clash with natural science or philosophy. Librarian. In my view, such an objection should not necessarily be rejected out of hand, despite the fact that there are better reasons. For example, I consider the lack of a true and proper sense of actuality in the positive religions a disadvantage. Incidentally, a host of substitutes now exists for the loss of opportunity for prayer caused by the collapse of religion. Nietzsche, for example, has written a more than veritable book of prayer. I suppose that's correct in a certain sense, but something crossed out, especially Nietzsche's truth, strikes me as too agitated and provocative. It's good for those who are yet to be set free. Something crossed out. For that reason, his truth is good only for them. I believe that I've recently discovered that we also need a truth for those who need constraint. It's possible that instead they need a depressive truth, which makes man smaller and more inward. Librarian. Forgive me, but Nietzsche interiorizes man exceptionally well. Perhaps from your standpoint, you're right, but I can't help feeling that Nietzsche speaks for those, to those who need more freedom, not to those who clash strongly with life, who bleed from wounds, who have been afflicted by actualities. Librarian. But Nietzsche confers a precious feeling of superiority even upon such people. I can't dispute that, but I know men who need inferiority, not superiority. Librarian. You express yourself very paradoxically. I don't understand you. Inferiority can hardly be a desideratum. Editor Edward.
Something that is wanted or needed.
Thank you, Editor Edward. Okay. Perhaps you'll understand me better if instead of inferiority I say, quote, resignation, end quote. A word that one used to hear a lot of, but seldom anymore. Librarian. It also sounds very Christian. As I said, there seem to be all sorts of things in Christianity that maybe one would do well to keep. Nietzsche is too oppositional. Like everything healthy and long-lasting, truth unfortunately adheres more to the middle way, which we unjustly abhor. Librarian. I really had no idea that you take such a mediating position. My position is not entirely clear to me. If I mediate, I certainly mediate in a very peculiar manner. At this moment, the servant brought the book, and I took my leave from the librarian. And that is the end of the entry for January 14th of 1914. And it was interesting, I'd say. Let's bring the cards back. And Editor Edward, you've had a chance to hear it all, read it and then hear it and then edit it. So what do you think? Is there any tie-in between these cards and runes and today's reading?
Maybe. Well, let's assume that it does relate. and that our job is to determine how it relates. So, possessions, separation, possessions, native land, home. I think it's safe to say that his native land, in the sense of, abstractly speaking, his ancestors were Christian, right? He inherited that Christianity, but he also inherited a division, a separation, can you hear the rain, between that. So, in a sense, he inherited, his native land is the struggle between religion, Christianity, and the new science, maybe something like that. The Four of Pentacles reversed, in this case, it's normally referring to clinging to your gold, and it kind of ties in with this. If we tie it in with that and we say his inheritance is the Christianity that was passed to him by perhaps his, let's say, grandmother, that might tie into something else later. He's being suspicious and he's clinging to his Christianity, maybe. It's one thing if we blindly interpret this as, just as it is on the page in this moment on January 14th, 1914, but most of the memes that I see that, reference Carl Jung are themselves antagonistic toward Christianity. So I think it's safe to say that this isn't a position that he maintains for the rest of his life. The reversed meaning, the chance of loss of earthly possessions. In this case, it's interesting and perhaps ironic that his earthly possession is Christianity. There's a chance he might lose it. Okay, I meant to point here, when I pointed here earlier, the gray-haired matriarch. I myself, my maternal grandmother was the one that instilled the Christianity in me, and by being my grandmother and by having an impact on me at a young age, and then in my early 20s I took care of her, so we were kind of together all the time for 5 years. I don't know, maybe it's speculation, but I think there's a gray-haired matriarch involved, influencing unconsciously or subconsciously or underneath the surface of Carl Jung's position that he's taking in clinging to Christianity and defending it and arguing for its relevance in his culture today. Not that he's wrong in this moment. I think maybe he has some good points, but I think the specific position he's taking isn't something that's emphasized later on, at least in the way that he's generally thought of. If that is the case, then the severed head would be perhaps Nietzsche, or at least a common understanding of him, people who focus on the God is dead part and not on the rest of it. The librarian seems to be arguing, the librarian, of course, is in Carl Jung as well, so that's an aspect of Carl Jung, but the protagonist, the first person position is Carl Jung defending Christianity against Nietzsche. But the matriarch, I think, in his mind is, saying, no, let's bring this clear understanding. And what is clear understanding if, not a simplistic understanding? Because who can have a clear understanding of something as complex as life, the universe, and everything, unless one has boiled it all down to a very simple philosophy, like, for example, Christianity, perhaps. The Page of Cups, perhaps, is Toni Wolff. There was the inscription, the Toni Wolff inscription that was connected to this page, apparently, so there's something going on with her, and so I think that there's some kind of conflict happening within Carl Jung, where he's, in this moment, taking the position of siding with his own grandmother against his girlfriend, or patient or partner, whatever Toni Wolff was at the time, perhaps. The eagle, I'm not sure if the eagle would relate to, it seems, okay, again, the reason I'm stuttering and hesitating is because my relationship with the eagle is grounded in the Golden Dawn paradigm, which is, of course, the British Empire's paradigm of let's conquer the world and then organize the whole thing under Britain, and then create a system where there's Jesus, the Anglican Jesus in the middle, and everything else, and all gods and all pantheons. You've seen 777, right? It's all just part of the same British tree of life. I mean, I'm cartooning it, but so yeah, the eagle in that specific context relates to the Scorpio, the higher aspect of Scorpio, the flying with the eagles, the alchemical eagle, which the medicine wheel eagle is Native American, so that's why I'm hesitating and stuttering, is because I don't want to like jump in and assume that this has anything to do, am I pointing to the right place, with my understanding of the eagle, but I'll just go with it for now, and with that disclaimer and apology perhaps. Yeah, he's clinging to the wisdom that guided him when he was young, that came from his grandmother, that was rooted in Christianity, in order to give himself a sense of flying above it all and not needing to get caught up in the confusion of modern 1914 world, because he's got this eagle spirit that he's calling upon. Maybe, I could be totally off. This is just off the cuff, based on, what little I know about all this. And okay, the belt of dwarven kind, if we are looking at, I know Lord of the Rings had not been written yet in the time that Carl Jung was having this vision, but my understanding of dwarves as a mythical being is that they are very miserly and love their gold and everything. And if the gold in this case is the Christianity inherited from one's grandmother, then it's his magical belt that he's using as his magical tool, and it's giving him persuasion, confidence, charisma. In this case, over himself, in that he's arguing with the librarian, but perhaps in the, behind the scenes, it has something to do with whatever process he's going through with Tony Wolff at the moment. And the Drider that he's up against, I guess the antagonist in the story, if you will, is this sort of science and reason-based, Nietzschean nihilism philosophy that Carl Jung is arguing against by saying, yes, but there is some good in Christianity, and maybe you ought to be knocked down a peg and be humble like me. And the librarian is at a disadvantage because the librarian isn't operating in the light, you might say. If this inherited Christianity gold is light, then the librarian is working in the darkness, like this Drider, and thus cannot get an effective attack against Carl Jung because he's a slippery fish. If you've ever tried to have a rational conversation or debate or argument with someone who's like a true believer Christian, then I think you get the dynamic here. So those are my thoughts. I, again, could be totally wrong, but that's just my thoughts in this moment about these cards and rune in relationship to Carl Jung's January 14th, 1914 active imagination experience.
Well, all right. Hope everybody's doing well. And hey, Pymander.
Oh, hey, BT, how's it going?
Hey, Pymander, how's it going? Did you have anything you wanted to, let people know about?
No, nothing I can think of.
Didn't you recently have a Japanese Vajrayana episode?
Oh, well, yeah. Yesterday I did the part 3 of the Shingon Buddhism segment of Buddhist Books podcast.
Cool. You want me to put a link to that at the end after the chicken cluck?
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Well, Pymander doesn't seem to care whether or not you watch his new episode, but I do. I want you to see his new episode just because. So once you hear the chicken cluck, then you'll see a link in the middle of the screen. Go ahead and click that and have fun.